7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
When I think of Resident Evil, my first thoughts tend to be viral weaponry and parasitic entities. As of late though, and with the introduction of the Winters family, we're getting mold creatures and vampires. Seriously, it seems like this time around the evil in Resident Evil is a few classic monster creature archetypes and lichens, partial werewolf creatures, and vampires among other things. We are well beyond the trope of fighting hordes of zombies in the dead of night the way we were just a few short decades ago. Although this is a fresh spin for the RE franchise, we can only hope that they also took the same approach to the archetypes they're using in this new iteration of a classic gaming series. So, the general story outline is that of main character loses something and sets out to get it back. In our case, it's Mr. Ethan Winters back after his time at the Baker Mansion in Resident Evil 7, only this time Ethan is a family man, with a brand new baby girl and a home that he shares with Mia, 2 years after the events of the previous game. Chaos erupts when Chris Redfield, Ethan's savior in the first game, comes into the Winters' home, kills Mia by point-blank shooting, and kidnaps Ethan's daughter and takes everyone away in a black van. The van crashes, and Ethan is left to his own devices, searching for his wife and daughter and finding out the secrets of the village he's trapped in along the way. Ethan travels through different areas and faces different lords of the land in an attempt to uncover the mysteries of his past, the village itself, and the whereabouts of his daughter. Overall, this game has a lot going for it. The story takes itself in a direction that both seems like a very natural progression from the previous game and yet completely different from anything that came before it, Resident Evil 4 notwithstanding. We get taken on yet another "someone was taken from me and I have to get them back" generic storyline, but only this time the game is framed in the style of a storybook with a fantasy-style villains who all have their own powers and abilities. In Resident Evil 7, the singular house with one family terrorizing the main character made for a very intimate and horrifying setting for players to be intrigued by, even if the overall catalyst for the adventure didn't make very much sense. Village attempts to not only retroactively explain gameplay elements from the first Ethan Winters outing, but also tie in the overall storyline to the major plot points of the Resident Evil series as a whole, which, if you hadn't played the other games in the series or had no idea what the timeline of the Resident Evil series was, would be completely lost on you. I can appreciate the effort the team put into making this game more relevant to the Resident Evil series for veteran players, but I can't help but feel that minor connections to the series would have been best served in this game without destroying the new direction the game was being taken. As it stands, the game is a very good standalone experience, but is marred by attempts to deepen the lore in the series as a whole. As a game, it is very well made and serviceable in its additions and refinements to the gameplay system and gameplay loop. Old mechanics from previous games make their return, and elements set up in RE7 were made better, utilizing the first-person viewpoint better than their previous effort. The game attempts to ground their gameplay elements by saying that Ethan was undergoing military training with Chris, leading to improvements to the aiming system, animation changes, and additions like the pushback shove, which were not present in the first Ethan outing.
You really have to stop worrying.
It's just finding you in Louisiana, the pregnancy, Chris moving us here, military training, it all happened so fast, you know?
Well, at least we're all together.
No! Take him away.
At least we're all together.
I personally didn't use the pushback system, opting to only use the block, so I can't speak for the effectiveness of the system in my own personal playthroughs. I do appreciate the changes to the aiming system, however. The aiming reticle is smaller and tighter and returns to precision aiming much more quickly than it did in the past. The base reload speed is also much faster, and there are now options to increase different elements of your firepower a la Resident Evil 4. This really helped to garner a sense of progression throughout the game. I honestly cannot remember as I write this if RE7 offered anything like this in terms of upgradable ability. One of the things that does come back, however, is the crafting system. Being able to create ammo and health items has been made easier and more streamlined. This is a great quality of life update for a much more faster paced game compared to the previous entry. It made it easier in tight areas or in the middle of a fight to create an item that I needed without feeling too much that I might have misclicked in a panic. It was nice to be able to craft and use a health item within a space of about 5 to 7 seconds once you were able to commit the button presses to memory. Well, now that we've gone over some of the gameplay mechanics and returning systems, I can talk about the way the game looks. Village returns on the RE engine that was previously utilized in RE7, but there is a noticeable upgrade to the environments and player models. Not saying that RE7 was ugly, Village is just a notable improvement over the last game. The environments look far more intricate and detailed, and each of the character models looks more realistic in terms of like skin textures and fabrics. Even hair and fabrics move in a much more believable way. I think all the visual upgrades just add to the fantasy elements. There are a lot of gothic style intricacies that would more than likely not have shown through in RE7 that look incredible in Village. The lighting looks great and enhances some of the assets the game has. Some of the game's areas look genuinely frightening just to lighting alone. Looking at you, dollhouse. Oh, wait. It's a literal dollhouse. Like a house for dolls. I just realized that as I was writing this. That's kind of funny. In terms of level design, I think this game did a fair bit well. The individual sections all follow their own themes, so each area feels like a level progression that needs to be conquered and explored. This may have been the intention because after finishing one area, you move on to the next with no clear way to break the sequence without resorting to glitches and manipulation. This creates an interesting traversal method where there are multiple points of no return, meaning that once you complete a section of game, you cannot go back to explore later. Castle Dimitrescu is a prime example of this, where you can explore the entirety of the castle provided you have the proper tools, and you can even unlock special interactions between Lady Dimitrescu and her daughters until you reach and defeat the boss monster. Once you begin the cutscene to progress to the fight, you're locked off from ever returning to the interior of the castle. This happens in one way or another in each of the sections, with the only outlier being the village itself, serving as the central hub connecting each of these areas together. There's even a special material that I missed on my first playthrough because of this point of no return system. This, in turn, grants a sort of open linearity where you can explore the entirety of a section to your heart's content until the point where you have to continue the game's linear progression. It's recommended to make sure that you've done all the exploring that you can before progressing, because not only will it be a point of no return, but the game will essentially force you to progress if you get to a certain point of the storyline. Once the trigger has been hit and all the story beats have been seen, the game will not give you an option to turn back before progressing further. We literally just came out of this tower. This is Dimitrescu Castle or whatever. Dimitrescu. Can't go back, right? No. Point of no return. Can't go back. A couple of times I went down an unsuspecting hallway only to find that I had triggered the next section of an area with no way to return to an area I felt like I hadn't explored properly. Oh, am I not allowed through there now? Fuck me. Okay. Oh. Is that entrails? Oh, that's disgusting. I wonder where these go. Let's find out. In all of this game's glory and of the great things I have to say about it, there's just one thing that I cannot ignore, and in my opinion, mars the game ever so slightly. In short, this game is just an updated version of Resident Evil 4. Excuse me. Oh, shit. This is so Resident Evil 4, it's not even funny. Okay. A lot of the story beats are the same. It follows the same sort of progression. Elements from RE4 are reintroduced, and there's even a reference to the merchant by the Duke.
What are you buying? Just something an old friend of mine used to say.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's really hard to ignore the similarities between the two games. I want to say that it's added to the joy that I felt while playing the game, but that wouldn't be the whole truth. Mainly what I felt was a sense of being in the know when it came to having things that were similar to the game that I've bought 7 times over. I could fully appreciate all of the elements that came from the previous games, and I could see which elements of Village were taken from Resident Evil 4. I do wish that the game could have refined the formula just a bit more, but adding RE4 style elements into a dark fantasy style setting was incredibly cool, especially for someone who's a huge fan of games that take place in dark fantasy or gothic horror settings, which both RE4 and Village sort of fit the bill. Overall, I very much enjoyed playing through Village. There are quite a bit of things that I would change for my own enjoyment and for more clarity as far as the game's story goes, but that's enough for a completely different video. If you want to see that, let me know. Village was a neat little bow on the RE7 storyline, and I'm surprised they took it in the direction that they did, especially so soon. The setting and the themes were right up my alley, and to be completely honest, it felt more akin to Van Helsing rather than Resident Evil. With a mixture of old mechanics and new technology, I'm really excited to see where the future of Resident Evil lies, if Village is anything to go by. It looks pretty promising.